Well, again, thank you all for joining today, our Workshop Wednesdays webinar series. We are very excited to have you and very excited about our webinar today. You guys are in for a special treat. We get to hear from two of our senior leaders at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, both working in areas on the cutting edge of some of the most interesting work happening at CMS. So we're very excited today for today's event. Again, I want to thank you guys for joining. The event today will be recorded, as you just heard. It will be posted to our YouTube channel, which my colleague Sean Forbes is going to post in the chat box. Speaking of the chat box will be disabled, but you all can ask any questions that you have in the Q&A box. Our speakers will be able to access the Q&As. We might even be able to ask some of those questions following their presentations verbally, so they can answer them on the call today. So feel free to use that box. And any other questions that you have recruitment related, myself and my colleague Sean will be answering by text. We will follow up today's webinar with an email to everybody who pre-registered. Although there are no slides today, today's event will be more conversational. We will follow up with some information and some details about our next webinar. So again, happy to have you today. Just a little bit about CMS before we get into our special guest today. The Centers for Medicare Medicaid Services is one agency under the Department of Health and Human Services. I work in our division of global hiring and outreach within our Office of Human Capital. So within CMS, we have a lot of business functions, but our general functions, we oversee the Medicare, Medicaid, Children's Health Insurance Program, and the Federal Health Insurance Exchanges. Combined, those programs touch the lives of about 145 million Americans across the country. We have about 25 different departments, so we call them centers and offices within our organization. We have about 25 different departments, and again, 2 of them will be represented today. The 2 that are represented were both created as a direct result of the Affordable Care Act, so they're relatively new departments, but again, very exciting work happening in both of them. We are headquartered in Baltimore, Maryland. We have small offices in DC and Bethesda, Maryland, and we also have 10 regional offices around the country as well. So a lot of work happening all over the country at CMS. And the positions that we hire for are really kind of various in nature. So while we are a health policy focused organization, and health administration and policy are definitely our main functions at our agency. So we hire a lot of people with those types of backgrounds. We also hire with a lot of people with a lot of different types of backgrounds as well. So media and communications, business backgrounds, finance. We have a huge finance department, program support. We hire general analyst type positions, technology, mathematicians, actuaries we have at our agency as well, and different science positions. So we definitely hire we run the gamut of backgrounds at our agency. But really what you're here for today is to hear from our guest speakers. So we have 2 speakers. One is from our Center for Consumer Information Insurance Oversight, and the other is from our Innovation Center, the Center for Medicare Medicaid Innovation. So up first is Jeff Wu. He is the Deputy Director for Policy for the Center for Consumer Information and Insurance Oversight. And I didn't want to give you too much because he's really going to give you a lot about his background and what CSIO, which is the acronym for his department, really does. So Jeff, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Marla. And welcome everyone. Super happy to be here and have a chance to talk a little bit about CSIO and about CMS and about my route. And I'm very, very happy to take questions. So let's see here. So the center within CMS that I work for is, as Marla was saying, acronym CSIO is essentially, you can think of it as the Center for Obamacare. If you think of the 3 main kind of programs that CMS runs, this is a huge part of the healthcare system in this country. But CMS runs Medicare, we run Medicaid, or rather we work with states in running Medicaid, and we run and supervise Obamacare, and that involves the exchanges through which individuals and small businesses can buy commercial health insurance, often with very significant subsidies. and it involves a lot of rulemaking and policymaking to sort of govern these markets across all of the states. Ara, my colleague Ara and friend, who we'll be talking a little bit later, they have a way better name. The Innovation Center is a much cooler name than CSIO, which is a real mouthful, but you can think of us as the Center for for Obamacare or healthcare reform or something like that. So I wanted to hit on a couple of themes that Marla said and really reinforce them. So at CSIO, we sort of have two parts. We run a traditional federal agency in the sense that we create rules, we interpret statutes, and we write rules and policies that govern sort of all of commercial health insurance across the country. And a lot of that, and so if you're, I don't know, if you or your parents or whoever have commercial health coverage through their employer, for example, there are rules that govern that, and CSIO, in conjunction with the Department of Labor and the Department of Treasury, writes a lot of the rules around how that health insurance works. But the other half, and perhaps the more exciting part of our business sometimes, is we run the exchanges. We are running a business out of the government. We run a business like eBay. It is a platform business. We have two sets of customers. On the one hand, we have insurance companies whom we are always trying to bring to the exchanges so that they will offer more and better kinds of health coverage. And we have consumers whom we serve. And like eBay, we are always looking for lots and lots of sellers so that there's a very competitive market, and so that we can ultimately bring value to all of the tens of millions of Americans who purchase their coverage through the exchanges and through the tax credits that are offered. And so, like a business, it takes all types. And one of the really fun parts of working within CSIO is that we are a team that involves, like sort of health, public health and policy specialists. I'm a lawyer, and I'll talk, in a minute about sort of my background, but lots of folks like me, but we work with lots of true sort of business types. We have actuaries on staff who are always thinking about sort of what these plans look like. We have people who run IT, who stand up the healthcare.gov infrastructure and are working on huge projects like, moving into the cloud and making things more efficient and thinking about capacity and thinking about efficiencies and the like. And like Marla says, we have accountants, we have HR specialists, we have operations specialists. We need all of these people on one team sort of working together as any sophisticated business would in order to do this. So it's a pretty fun, interesting thing to be doing within the government, to be running what we consider to be a very cutting edge business, right? Like if you think about sort of our annual turnover, I suppose you could say that we sell, on the order of $50 billion of health insurance every year through through our product channels. We have many types of product channels of varying flavors, and we have to manage all of those ecosystems like any large business would. We consider ourselves to be very entrepreneurial, so we do a lot of stuff with cutting edge technology to try to bring a lot of efficiency and benefits to consumers. And we're at the unfortunately sometimes we're also sort of at the cutting edge of politics and health policy. That adds excitement in its own way. And for some people, that's a plus. I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie. Before I came to CMS, I was a mergers and acquisitions lawyer. So I kind of love that part of it. But love it or hate it, it's part of our world. And so one of the things that we say at CSIO is, if it's CSIO, you must love civics, because every week is another civics lesson about like some piece of legislation that's going to affect us that is caught up in like, the Senate and subject to like bird bath rules or whatever. And so we have to, like talk to everyone about like what this means and implications and how we plan for it and all that sort of stuff. And so I consider that super fun, like a really interesting part of our work. And we really try and make sure that the whole team, and our whole team is sort of like 450 or so people within CMS, and then, double that again for contractors and the like who sort of work with us and are very much part of our team too. And it is important for all parts of our team to sort of understand the full context of what we do. So we really try to be very open about those discussions, and everyone sort of understands sort of the big context in which we operate. So that's about the center. Everyone, as befits a team of such sort of varying backgrounds and skills and the like. Everyone who comes to it a little differently, and Ara will talk about her journey too. My journey is, I was not a permanent Fed before I came to CMS 10 years ago. I joined shortly after the Affordable Care Act passed, and I joined to help implement the Affordable Care Act, and so I came to CMS to join CSIO. At the time, CSIO was truly a startup. It was, I think when I joined, the group that I joined, when I started talking to them, had like 3 people on it. By the time my offer finally came through, it had like 12. And within a year, it had like 60. And now it's sort of stabilized at about 80. Society overall is like 450. But we were sort of fast growing at the time and trying to figure everything out. We would often have meetings that would start with sitting down and saying, okay, we have to implement sections 1341 through 1343, and everyone would just open their statute book and stare at it and read it and try to figure out how we were going to do this. So it was, and I know that Ara has many of the same sorts of stories in those early days, but it was very much a startup in those days. We are much bigger and more sophisticated now. We had to sort of, piece together a lot of stuff in the early days and just sort of make sure it worked at a very basic level. And now we are, I think we get more and more efficient, more and more thoughtful and competitive. We have lots of private sector competitors in the sense that we think about and we benchmark against. But my path was I came out of sort of one of these big law firms in Washington, D.C. Like I say, I was a mergers and acquisitions lawyer. I had a side practice of doing a lot of appellate litigation. I did a lot of pro bono stuff, basically constitutional litigation. So I had sort of a government-facing kind of portfolio. I had a lot of interactions with the Department of Justice, with the State Department on a lot of my matters, and a lot of my deals were sort of in the health space. I did a lot of pharmaceutical deals in particular. So, but it wasn't particularly relevant to the work that CSIO does in those early days, and still today. Like everything that we do is kind of new, and we're sort of making it up as we go along. So it's very hard to sort of have the exact training that you would need to ever do it. You have to kind of figure it out along the way. And so I was one of those too. And I just joined and helped sort of figure it out along the way. A lot of the skills I learned in the private sector around doing deals and around sort of careful drafting and being a thoughtful lawyer and being government facing and thinking about those sorts of civics issues, I think have played a huge part in my in my ability to sort of contribute at CSIO. I also have an MBA, so I have a lot of like business. I have pretty extensive business background as well, and so that I think that helps a lot because a lot of what we do is think about sort of how is a private insurance company going to think about this? How will they react to this policy or that policy? And so it is important to be able to both talk to those folks who are, like I say, our customers, and put yourself in their shoes to understand how you nudge the policy levers to sort of get them to do what we want them to do, which is offer sort of the best coverage at the lowest prices for consumers. Marla, is that sort of enough for this bout? I want to give Ara a chance to get into everything that she and her center do.
Sure, definitely. That's so interesting to me. I actually did not know your background, so that is very interesting to me. It actually made me think of a question, and we did actually have a couple questions that came in that I want to ask you as well. But one thing that struck me, so you mentioned you were a mergers and acquisitions lawyer prior to coming to CSIO, or was not a Fed. So what was it at the time that made you seek out federal employment when you made that decision?
So, and again, like everyone has sort of their own path to the federal government and to CMS. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about our team, our broad team, is that people come from all over and have all kinds of backgrounds and work together really well. But for me, one of the things I noticed, so I started the practice of law out in San Francisco. So I was kind of a deal lawyer out there. We moved to DC, honestly, because my wife has 2 sisters, and when I married into the family, it was kind of understood that like wherever the sisters decided we were all going to live, that's where we were all going to live. So that was sort of price of admission. So I happily paid that price of admission, and we moved here once sort of all the sisters decided that this seemed like a nice area to settle. And so I ended up sort of, working for this big DC firm. In DC, there's, these big firms, there's a culture of government service. So a lot of the senior partners that I worked with that I really looked up to, almost all of them had done a very significant stint of government service at some point. And often it was like totally unconnected to their practice. But it was often the thing that they spoke sort of most proudly of. And, there was one guy who very old senior partner who, he did like some kind of like obscure commercial litigation that involved years and years of discovery or whatever. And, he was very successful, of course. But then I found out at some later point that actually early on in his career, he had left the firm, he'd joined the Department of Justice, and he'd helped desegregate schools in the South as part of, the civil rights department, and spent sort of 2 years on the front lines as a litigating attorney doing that sort of stuff, and then went back to the firm and did his big commercial work. So I always admired that. I think that's part of the ethic of being a great DC lawyer, and so I sort of always had that, and I was always interested and wanted to do it. It was reflected in my practice, and so. When the Affordable Care Act was passed, I was like, these sorts of opportunities to implement change of this scale in a way that can help so many people, they just don't come around very often in one's career. And so I just thought this is a good time. I should just jump in and see what I can do for a couple of years. And of course, here I am 10 years later. I just got my certificate signed and still here and still trying to find a way to, to keep moving the needle. It kind of grows on you. It's hard to leave. It's hard to find another job that has the same, sort of pace and scope of impact as you can have in the federal government. And it's, honestly, it's aggravating at times, but it is also super, super fun. So I'm still here.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I'm sure that's helpful to a lot of people on the call today. We are getting a lot of questions in, so I'm going to cut it off at a couple more questions. But one question that came in was, what would be your suggestion for somebody who may have a degree? This particular person has a degree, a master's in public administration, very interested in healthcare policy, but doesn't have a true background in it. Do you have any recommendations for any things, books, articles, other resources that they can look into, read about, just to learn more information prior to potentially seeking jobs?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Obviously, there's sort of a whole USA Jobs component of this, which makes it very important to be able to sort of put things on your resume that kind of check boxes. And so, obviously, to the extent that you can get any kind of coursework or certification or whatever that fits into those buckets, it's helpful. I don't think as a substantive matter it is essential. I'm far more interested in hiring folks who have a broad view, have broad capabilities, and are really interested in the work, and that can show through. I can talk a little bit about what I read. I'm a pretty voracious reader. I came into this job not knowing a lot of the basics of health insurance. I remember at one point very early on, one of my staff, super smart sort of member of my staff, I sat down with her and we were trying to figure out this whole new program on cost sharing reductions. And we're staring at the statute and I look up at her and I say, when you say balanced billing, and I was sort of trying to angle my way around to sort of asking her what this all was, to explain all this without actually admitting that I didn't know what I was talking about. And of course she saw right through it and just rolled her eyes and I started from ABC and explained it all to me. I'm her manager, of course. But that's fine, of course. Everyone comes in, the world of health policy is so complex. And there's so many pieces that connect. All you can do is start with your area, sort of learn it, try to master it, and then grow it out. Because a zillion things all connect, right? Even if you're just thinking about set aside government policies, just the private sector, which society was very involved with, and how it works, and you've got you've got hospitals and providers, and then you have the drug manufacturers, and you have device manufacturers, and you have PBMs, and you have third-party administrators, and then you have the insurance companies, way up the chain, and all the various flavors of payers and how they all connect is very, very complex, and it's very difficult to be expert in more than a few areas. So you sort of pick your spots, and and grow it out. That's the only way I have found to be able to do it. I read, look, I read everything I can in sort of the business press, like, stuff in the Journal and Business Week and all that sort of stuff. I skim the journal Health Affairs, comes out every month, just to sort of stay roughly in touch with sort of what's going on in the world of health services research, which is a big part of this. Now, my work is more business oriented, doesn't touch that stuff, but you can't understand what's happening in the business world unless you understand sort of what's happening fundamentally in the way people think about health services. I'll say, like, one good cheat is there's a ton of great podcasts that cover sort of like the politics of healthcare and the like all the time. There's one by from KFF, the folks at the Kaiser Family Foundation. They put out Pulse Check does one that's from Politico, where it's a little bit more sort of politics and newsy and the like. But you start listening to some of those, and they link you to others, and you start to sort of grow that that diet. I also, like, as we delve into some new area, like if we get into like interoperability or whatever, I will usually go and like buy the best textbook I can find in the area and just start reading that, just to like give myself like kind of a 101 in the area. But like, everyone learns in their own way, and it is more important to sort of find your way of like assimilating this information. I sort of have that bent, so I read textbooks and journals and the like. I'm not saying everyone should do that. That's like, like my family really looks askance at me when we're all like cuddling up on the couch and folks are sort of, reading their People magazine or whatever, and I'm pulling out Health Affairs, but that's me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm gonna finish out with one quick question. And that is, what do you feel like the most exciting project is coming on the horizon for CSIO?
So we're in the middle of a huge special enrollment period where we have offered, so the American Rescue Plan really beefed up subsidies for folks, sort of higher subsidies for people getting them, and new subsidies for folks who were previously not getting them. So we're in the middle of implementing that, and that's really exciting. We've got, we've had sort of our millionth sort of customer through the door through that process. We're going through August. On the policy front, by far, I think the most exciting thing that's happening right now is we are implementing the No Surprises Act, which is a statute that passed back in December that tries to fix the problem of balanced billing and surprise billing. So this is when, like, you go to the hospital and you get some procedure done, and then you get this bill that you don't know where it came from, and it turns out that, like, the anesthesiologist or someone else who sort of worked on the process was not in network, and they send you this huge bill. This has been a problem for years we've tried to address. We've had limited tools to do so. So when Congress addressed it, obviously it created a huge opportunity, but it's a huge change to the industry. And so we're in the middle of putting in place a number of rules and processes and building systems and the like that will make sort of all of this work as seamlessly as possible. But this is going to be a multi-year undertaking, and it's it is probably the biggest shift going on in the commercial coverage world right now.
Thanks for that. And I know along with that No Surprises Act came with some hiring, so you guys are kind of in the middle of doing a little bit. So happy to hear that. I'm sure some of the folks on the line are happy to hear that. We're getting a ton of questions in. So before I introduce our next speaker, thank you so much, Jeff, for sharing your expertise and your background and your experiences. I'm sure it was very helpful to a lot of people on the line today. So thank you for your time. If Jeff is able to stick around, he may be able to look at some of the questions if you have any specifically for Jeff. But before I introduce our next speaker, I just want to address some of these. A lot of people are asking about internships. So I just want to address, kind of generally speaking, we do hire most of our interns through our summer intern program. Unfortunately, the application period for that for this year has closed. So we aren't accepting any new applications for our paid summer internship program. However, we do accept non-paid interns anytime throughout the year. All of our internships right now, and everybody, and we had a few questions about Virtual jobs. So we are still basically our agency is still full-time 100% telework at the moment due to COVID. We aren't exactly sure what our post-pandemic landscape or telework landscape will look like. So we're still kind of in limbo with that. Previous to COVID, we did have a pretty robust telework program. However, new employees were not able to telework full-time right as they got hired. So we're not sure if that's going to change yet. So what we are suggesting to people that if they are hired by a office at CMS, you should be prepared to report to that office when we are called back to the office. Again, all of that is subject to change, but we're just not sure what that will look like yet. Our internship program, as I mentioned, that is fully virtual as well. We can accept non-paid interns at any time throughout the year. And if you visit cms.gov/careers@CMS, we'll throw that link in the chat as well. Our careers site has a subpage for recent graduates and current students. And you can find all of the information on our internship programs, our recent graduate programs. We do have a few recent graduate announcements currently posted, and that will be posted in the next week or two as well. And the information about where to send your resume if you're interested in a non-paid internship is also on that page as well. So just wanted to get that out as we were seeing a bunch of questions about internships and people who have recently graduated. So wanted to put that out there. But now I'm excited to introduce our next and final guest speaker. She is the Deputy Director for our Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation, also known as our Innovation Center. So our Taba Bedward is up next. So take it away, Ara.
Great. Good afternoon, and thank you so much, Marla. It is really exciting to be here and to be a part of this Workshop Wednesday series. And I'm looking forward to talking a little bit about CMS's Innovation Center, which is where I work, and share a little bit of my personal story. I am at this point a longtime CMS employee, and as Marla said, currently the Deputy Director in the Innovation Center. And the center was created as part of the Affordable Care Act and tasked with developing and testing innovative new ways of paying for and delivering healthcare, with the ultimate goal of helping to move our healthcare system away from fee-for-service toward value-based care. So we're sort of an R&D shop for CMS. And unlike Jeff, I was not in the Innovation Center during the early days, but I have heard many, many interesting stories. I joined the Innovation Center about 5 years ago. But the beginnings of the Innovation Center were not surprisingly terribly different from CSIO. It was very small group that very quickly grew. And we currently have just under 400 employees, so we're a little bit smaller than CSIO. And most of our employees are located in Baltimore. We have a handful who are working in other parts of the country, but by and large, our team is in Baltimore. And as Marla said, we've all been fully remote since March, but we are actually located in a building that is outside the main office, which makes for an interesting culture shift for those of us who started working in the main building. Being located just outside of the building has its pluses, but it is a little bit different and really allows the team to connect and gel in a way that I think is not always possible when you're sort of spread out in the central office. But our team of 400 is really diverse. You heard Jeff talk about the wide range of skills and expertise that he has in CSIO. The same is true of our team in CMMI. We have everything from public health specialists and researchers and data scientists to IT specialists and lots of clinicians, administrative specialists, lots of contract specialists, and attorneys. I did not realize that Jeff is an attorney, so I learned something today. But that is really one of the wonderful things about CMMI and about CMS. We have a staff that is incredibly diverse in its experience and expertise, and the ability to bring that diversity of experience and expertise to bear on CMS's programs is an incredible, incredible thing. And it is not unusual for CMS staff to leave for a period of time and come back. We have lots of folks who have left the Innovation Center, left CMS for other opportunities, and subsequently returned. Our new director, who is at this point maybe about 6 or 7 weeks in, is on her third return to HHS. So that speaks volumes, I think, to the experience and commitment that our employees really have to the mission and to the organization. We are, as you heard, one of the newest components of CMS. We just last year celebrated our 10th anniversary. But in that 10 years have been able to accomplish a lot. We have launched more than 60 model tests, demonstrations, and initiatives. We have more than 528,000 clinicians and plans who have participated in our model tests, and close to 28 million patients who have received care through our models. And we run these tests with the hope that if they are successful, that we're able to expand them. And expansion is tied to our ability to demonstrate that the tests we're running meet certain criteria for success. And under the best case scenario, we have a test that both reduces costs and improves quality of care that's delivered to patients. But we also consider models successful if they're able to reduce costs and maintain quality, or alternatively maintain costs and improve quality. So far, we've had 4 tests that we've run that have met the expansion criteria. And we are hopeful that as we continue running tests, that we will see many more that meet those expansion criteria that we're able to take from being model tests to being part of a national program. Because CMS is the single largest payer for healthcare in the United States, with almost 90 million Americans relying on healthcare benefits provided through our programs, the work that the Innovation Center does in transforming the healthcare system is more significant than just for our particular organization. The significance goes beyond CMS's programs and really has implications for the entire healthcare ecosystem. And it's the opportunity to have this sort of an impact that really initially drew me to CMS. As a second-year law student, I had the chance to intern in the Office of General Counsel and had a chance to work with CMS staff on a number of issues, and was absolutely intrigued by the policy development work that they were doing and the impact that that work had on health and healthcare in the United States. So much so that when I returned to school in the fall, I pursued opportunities through our career services to join CMS. And I was pointed to what at the time was called the Presidential Management Intern Program. And it is, I think now, the Fellows Program. Marla, correct me if that's wrong. But it is a fantastic way for individuals who are completing their graduate studies to join federal service. CMS is not the only federal organization to participate. I think it is across the entire federal government. But it is a 2-year rotational program. If you're not familiar with it, it's 2 years. You're able to rotate across your home component. I came in, as I said, through CMS. And once you're done with those rotations, you become a full-time regular federal employee. But as a PMI, you have the opportunity to work in different parts of your organization. I was able to come in through CMS's Office of Financial Management in their Program Integrity Group, did a rotation in the Office of Legislation and the Center for Medicare, and was also able to do a rotation outside of CMS in the Department of Justice in the component that deals with Medicare fraud. So early on in my career, had an opportunity to see CMS from a lot of different perspectives, including outside through the eyes of a partner agency. And this invaluable experience and perspective has really been extremely important to me throughout my federal career, and made a lot of connections early on through that program that I call on routinely in my current role. Fantastic opportunity to come into the federal government and gain some important experience coming in the door. In my current role as one of 2 deputy directors in the Innovation Center, I have a lot of different responsibilities. I won't try to run through all of them, but I did want to give you a flavor for some of the things that I spend my time on, because they might not be exactly what you would imagine. I help provide oversight and direction, obviously, to the Innovation Center's work. I want to help ensure that the center is meeting its mission and vision. So provide strategic and tactical direction and input to our teams, help with policy and operational issues and decision-making. I also spend a lot of time helping our teams. So as a manager, helping to remove obstacles and barriers to the work that our teams are doing is an important part of what I do. I spend a fair amount of my day helping to troubleshoot and ensure that our teams are able to make progress on the work that they're doing. Related to that, we also partner with a lot of other components. We do not work in isolation. Lots of the work that we do intersects with other parts of CMS. And so it is important that we maintain and develop really good partnerships with other parts of CMS and HHS. And that is some of what I spend my time doing, building and nurturing those relationships, connecting with my counterparts across CMS and HHS, helping to build and nurture relationships and partnerships that will help the Innovation Center to do its work. And will help our teams to do the things that they need to do to develop and run our models. Similarly, the Innovation Center has lots and lots of stakeholders. So many, many people who are interested in what we do, who have thoughts and suggestions about how best to do those things. And we take that input seriously. We want to hear from our stakeholders. We want their feedback. We want their input. We want to hear their thoughts about model concepts, model operations, and in order to get that, we need to engage with them regularly. So I also spend some of my time meeting with and talking to our many, many stakeholders outside of CMS and making sure that they feel like they have a connection to the Innovation Center and a way to make their voice heard with our team. The team that we have, as I mentioned, is fairly large, 400 people or so. So another important part of my responsibility is helping to develop and grow that team. We have, as I noted, lots of different types of individuals on our team, lots of different experience that they bring to bear on our work. So just making sure that we are that we have on hand the right skills, the right type of individuals, doing succession planning, helping to create opportunities for our team to develop and grow is an important part of what I do and an important part of the way that I support the Innovation Center's work. And I also try to do a little bit of that for myself. I'm not as good at carving out time, but I do try to also make sure that I'm spending time on my own professional development, and CMS provides lots and lots of support and resources to make that possible. The other thing that I wanted to share with you is that as part of the Senior Executive Service, Jeff and I have responsibilities that actually go beyond our components. So, you know, beyond the responsibilities that I have to CMMI, as a member of the Senior Executive Service, I also have a responsibility to participate in and help support enterprise level work and activities. And Jeff did not share his current role, so maybe I'll leave him to share that, but I think that's a fantastic example of the sort of things that we're called upon to do as part of the SES that go beyond the traditional roles that we fulfill in our respective centers and offices. And Marla, the last thing that I'll share before turning things back over to you is that, you know, I've been in CMS for more than 20 years at this point. And I will say that the other thing that has been a big draw for me is that even though I've been in a lot of different components, had an opportunity to work on many, many different projects, I never feel like I've learned everything there is to know about the work that CMS does. I feel as if there is always something more to learn, something new to dive into. And I think that's a lot of what keeps my job interesting and rewarding, and what keeps me engaged. And what I think is attractive to a lot of those of us who come to CMS and come to the Innovation Center. And so with that, I will turn things over to you. It looks like there are some questions that are popping up, and I'm happy to answer those if that's helpful.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ara. Again, thank you for sharing your story and your expertise and really your advice. On the note of advice, I do have a couple follow-up questions. So you mentioned you began your career as a presidential management intern, now called the Presidential Management Fellows Program. And you're now a deputy center director. So wondering what advice you might have for somebody either starting out entry level or maybe just making a career change, but whose ultimate goal is to reach the senior leadership position. What kind of advice would you give that person?
Couple of things. One is maybe be patient. You know, one of the things that I think has been really valuable is just the opportunity to see the organization from a lot of different perspectives, and getting a lot of different experience under your belt, I think is absolutely invaluable and critical if you have an interest in doing senior level management. I think, you know, Jeff can share with you the sort of broad experience and opportunities that he's taken on. And I think you need to do that throughout your career. One of the things that was shared with me early on that I think was good advice was to, you know, take the opportunity to do work that is maybe outside of your usual portfolio whenever those opportunities come along. So, you know, when I was asked to take on special projects that, you know, maybe weren't the thing that I felt strongest in or that reflected the areas where I was expert in, I tried to take those. You know, I did not know a lot about the Medicare program when I joined. I think I had a similar path to Jeff's in that I really just learned as I went along, got really smart in the space that I was responsible for, and then build upon that with, you know, learning about other parts of the program, moving and working in other parts of the agency to expand my understanding of the programs and really of the healthcare space. So I would say try to get as, you know, broad experience and be patient. The last thing maybe that I would throw in there is get good mentors when you come in the door. That is something that I did not do until much later in my career and regretted it, and understand the value of getting good mentors, particularly mentors who are in the positions that you want to occupy, is really helpful.
That's fantastic advice. Definitely just kind of taking on those opportunities that may come your way that may stretch your knowledge or your experience. I think that's definitely valuable experience along with everything else you mentioned. So
Marla, I can throw in a
yeah, sure, go ahead.
Additional thoughts that I totally agree with everything that Ara mentioned. And like Ara said, you know, we both are in a position where we were asked to sort of take on a lot of sort of broader agency-wide duties beyond our centers. So in a sense, we were forced to sort of stretch outside our silos sometimes. Ara put a much more positive spin on some of these activities, and sometimes I sometimes consider this the SES tax. But that's okay. Like, all of these activities you'll learn something from. I think it is really important to go into a career with an attitude with a spirit of collegiality, of generosity, of trying to do everything you can to sort of help not only the folks on your team, but on other teams. And then those connections start to come, and you start to the projects we work on are so complicated and so hard. They very, very often involve sorts of pulling together people from different teams to work together. And if you can get good at that by having, starting with that spirit of collegiality and wanting to work together and wanting to help coordinate things and wanting to help your colleagues out, you'll learn from them and you learn from those experiences. And then you learn this really critical skill in the government of being able to collaborate and coordinate across boxes, across centers, across agencies, which becomes more and more critical. Sort of the higher up you go. This is, the government is a huge place. It has huge sorts of span and scope and resources and the like, but pulling sort of everyone together to be sort of moving in the same direction is hard, and takes a lot of practice and takes a certain attitude, and I think that folks really look for that as they think about who can step up and manage bigger and bigger teams.
That's great advice as well, Jeff. Thank you for that. The collaboration piece is so important. As you mentioned, really, if your desire is to go into leadership, you're going to need that skill. So thanks for that, Jeff. And then, just lastly, more specifically about the Innovation Center, what do you think has been one or a couple of the most challenging hurdles that the Innovation Center has faced over the last few years?
Great question. I actually think the most significant hurdle is the one that we are trying to tackle now, and that is taking the 10 years of experience that we now have under our belts, and using that to chart our path forward for the next 10 years or 20 years. Right, we've run a lot of tests. We've learned a lot. There are things where we have been incredibly successful and things where we have not so much been successful. And thinking about how we take what we've learned and translate that into a strategy for the Innovation Center going forward that allows us to continue to move the ball forward on the incredible healthcare transformation that the center was established to do. We haven't completed it. It's not done. We've made incredible progress. And so, figuring out how we continue to move forward and make progress in the coming years, I think is one of the biggest challenges that we have.
Yeah, it sounds like a huge undertaking, but I'm sure the team is up for the job. I know you guys have a great team over in the Innovation Center, so thanks for that. I want to take just a couple of minutes. I know we're running up on about an hour here. We did get started a few minutes late, so those who were able to hang in there with us, really appreciate your time. We do still have a lot of questions coming in, so I would just want to assure you that even when we adjourn here, that myself and my colleague will stay online to answer as many questions as we can through the question and answer box. I do want to address, we got a lot of questions from recent graduates, people who are saying they recently graduated and interested in CMS employment in general. Just want to give a little bit more information about our recent graduates program. We do, I will say, have an entire webinar dedicated towards this. We just hosted that last month, and so it is up on our YouTube channel. So we put the YouTube channel in the chat box, as well as we answered the question with the link as well. So feel free to log onto our YouTube channel, find the one. It's called Recent Graduates Unite. We just hosted it last month, and it is a relatively shorter webinar, so not too much of your time, but it will go over definitely some more details of our Recent Graduates program, along with we had a panel of current and former recent graduates who were able to answer some of the questions as well. So, but our Recent Graduates program is for anybody who's graduated within the previous 2 years, and also folks who are graduating that current semester are eligible to apply. So obviously this semester is coming to an end. So we had our positions up over the last several months. We typically post about 2 to 4 announcements per semester, and we stagger them throughout the semesters. However, what you will see is a couple more recent graduate postings going up, as I mentioned earlier today. So we do have a few individual needs. The ones we post during the semesters are agency-wide. Any manager in the agency can access those lists of applicants. And then the ones we have coming up over the next couple of weeks, individual hiring departments had a need, and because we didn't post specifically for those over the semester, we are going to be posting a HR specialist position that goes up tomorrow. And then in the coming weeks, we will also post a budget analyst position as well. And then currently, we also do have a health insurance specialist announcement posted for the Denver and Kansas City locations, our Denver and Kansas City offices. So just a note that we do have recent graduate opportunities. Our next big push for our recent graduates program will be in the fall semester. So in the fall semester, we will again post agency-wide announcements staggered throughout the fall. Again, if you're within your 2-year window of graduation, you're eligible to apply, or if you are graduating in December at the end of the fall semester, you're eligible to apply to those as well. So just wanted to mention that, as we did have a lot of questions from recent graduates come in through the Q&A box. So with that, I'm going to check in with Sean, but before I do that, I want to launch a quick poll and just to kind of get some quick feedback from you. It's only a few questions. If you could respond, that would be awesome. We just always want to continue to try to make these workshops better, or the best they can be. So if you have a chance to complete the poll, that would be awesome. And then to wrap up, I really just want to thank our guest speakers today. They were very giving of their time. I'm not sure if you're familiar. They both mentioned the Senior Executive Service. That is the most senior leadership at our agency, which basically translates into their schedules are insane. So they both dedicated a lot of time today. So we definitely appreciate Ara and Jeff. Thank you both so much for your time and your insights. Definitely your expertise that you shared today. We really appreciate it. I know the audience got a lot out of it today. In addition to that, just want to thank you guys, everybody that participated today, for your time. I know it's valuable as well. Just a reminder, you will get a follow-up email from us. Just again, kind of going over a little bit of information and directing you to our next webinar, which will be on June 2nd. And that topic will be decoding federal resumes. So we're talking all about federal resume writing, what you should include, how it differs from resumes that you might be submitting for the private sector. So everything you want to know about federal resumes will be in 2 weeks, Wednesday on June 2nd. We host these workshops every first and third Wednesdays. So the link that you had to register for this, you can register for any of our future webinars as well. Sean, we just want to do a quick check-in with you to see if there's anything else I should be addressing.
Hey, Marla. No, a lot of great questions today in the Q&A. I'm still going through answering everybody's questions, but as far as everything else, you've addressed, the recent grad, the internships, all the kind of the frequently asked questions we've had today. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sean. And thank you for feverishly addressing all of the questions that are coming in. Again, don't want you guys to worry. We're not going to completely disable the webinar, as we are going to go through these questions and answer as many as possible. But just our last reminder that this particular webinar will also be posted to our YouTube channel, and it will be posted at the beginning of next month. So we take all the webinars from the previous month and post them during the first week of the following month. So you can look out for that the first week in June. So with that, again, want to thank both of our speakers today for your time. Jeff and Ara, you gave some amazing information today, so thank you so much. And with that, we can adjourn. Again, we are going to keep the webinar open just to answer these questions in the Q&A box. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.